And today we are plunging deep into the 4th century. We're talking about the really volatile years between 325 and 364 AD.
This is a story of just extreme geopolitical tension, theological upheaval. It focuses right on the immediate aftermath of Constantine the Great's reign.
Right. And it's a period where the ambition of his successors, frankly, almost tore the Roman Empire apart, while right across the border, this implacable, brilliant enemy was just waiting.
So this deep dive is really at its core about legitimacy, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. We're looking at two massive empires, Rome and Persia, and both are desperately trying to consolidate power.
And it seems like one succeeds and one fails spectacularly.
That's it. Rome completely fumbles its succession and its religious policy, while Persia, under a king named Shapur II, achieves a level of competence that would define the next century of conflict.
Our sources for this period really paint a picture where the throne room, the battlefield, and the pulpit were all basically the same place.
They were completely inseparable.
Okay, so let's set the scene. We have to start with Constantine's biggest, most strategic political act, moving the imperial capital east to Byzantium.
And renaming it Constantinople, the new Rome.
This wasn't just a geographical shift, was it? It was a statement.
It was a loud, unspoken challenge to the reigning superpower of the East, the Sasanian Persian Empire. By moving the capital right to the junction of Europe and Asia, Constantine basically put the new Rome right in his enemy's face.
He's centralizing the empire's military focus right where it's needed most.
Exactly. So our mission today is to follow three interconnected threads. First, the relentless rise of this formidable Persian king, Shapur II.
Right.
Second, the chaotic and bloody succession crisis that follows Constantine's death and just bleeds Rome dry.
And finally,
the absolutely crucial and often destructive role that Christianity played in defining and often undermining political power in both of these empires.
let's start there then, with the man who capitalized on all that Roman distraction, Shapur II. He's often called the Lion of Persia.
And he has one of the most unique, and I mean truly dramatic, ascensions to power in history. It almost suggests his reign was destined for greatness from the very beginning.
How so?
Well, it's a literal crowning in the womb.
Wait, in the womb? Seriously?
His father, Hermes, dies just a month before Shapur is born. So you have an immediate power vacuum. But the Persian establishment, the noblemen and the priests of Zoroastrianism, their state religion, they can't just let the throne stay empty.
So what do?
The sources tell us, in this incredibly symbolic and political act, they place the royal crown not on an infant's head, but upon the queen's pregnant belly. He was officially king from that very moment in 309 AD.
That is phenomenal political theater. But, I mean, having a king who hasn't even been born yet, that creates a massive, decades-long power vacuum right at the center of the empire.
It does. The regency lasts until Shapur reaches maturity, which is around 325 AD. That's 16 years where the power of the throne is just dispersed.
And the sources are pretty clear about what happened during that time.
Oh, crystal clear. These regents were, and this is a quote, more concerned for their own power than for the greater good of Persia.
So the empire just suffered. Neglect, infighting.
Exactly. While Constantine is busy consolidating his own power and founding Constantinople, Persia is essentially fighting with itself.
And that kind of internal weakness, it always invites external threats. This brings us to the Arab invasions.
Right, and this is a fascinating part of the story because it's driven by environmental factors. It was an existential crisis for the Arab tribes south of Persia.
What was happening?
The water table in the Arabian Peninsula was sinking, so these nomadic Arabs were driven north, desperate for new pastures, for habitable land. The Arab historian Al-Tabari described them as the most needy of all the nations.
And their raids just got more and more disruptive.
They were seizing cattle, cultivated land, anything they could in the Persian province of Fars, while the Persian government was, paralyzed by these regents who had set the royal crown on the head of a mere child.
That must have felt like a ticking clock for Shapur.
Absolutely. So the moment he comes of age in 325, he seizes command. And his response wasn't just swift, it was intensely personal. And it defined his entire 40-year reign.
What did he do?
He selects a personal strike force, 1,000 elite horsemen personally loyal to him, and he immediately leads them against the Arabs, who had been using Fars as their personal pasture ground.
And the sources describe this campaign as just immensely violent. It wasn't just defense?
No, it was brutal revenge. It was meant to define Persian control of the entire Gulf region. Al-Tabari details this systematic slaughter. He says Shapur wrought great slaughter among them, reduced others to the harshest form of captivity, and put the remainder to flight.
And he didn't stop at the border.
Not at all. He sends a fleet across the Persian Gulf, landing in eastern Arabia, and pushes as far as the oasis city of Medina.
Medina, that's deep into the peninsula.
Oh, incredibly deep. The quotes we have are chilling. Al-Tabari writes that Shapur shed so much of their blood that it flowed like a torrent swollen by a rainstorm.
That level of calculated brutality, it explains how he earned one of the most terrifying nicknames in history.
Du al-Aktaf.
The man of the shoulders?
Yes, because he was occupied with great eagerness in killing the Arabs and tearing out the shoulder blades of their leaders. This wasn't just a campaign, it was a decades-long policy designed to intimidate everyone and restore the Persian pride that had been lost during the regency.
So this is the ruthless, powerful ruler that Constantine's heirs are about to face.
Exactly. But the sources also show us he was more than just a warlord. There's another side to him.
You mean his administrative skill?
Yes. There's this great anecdote from Al-Tabari that shows his early capacity for governmental insight. As a young man, Shapur sees his people dangerously crossing a single crowded bridge over the Tigris. It was chaotic, hazardous.
So he sees this inefficiency, this danger, and his solution is, well, it's remarkably modern for the 4th century.
He orders a second bridge built right next to the first.
Yep.
Then he mandates that one bridge is for traffic going one way and the other for traffic going the opposite way.
A one-way system.
Basically, yeah. It immediately relieved the danger, created order, and proved he cared about his subjects. The source says the child grew in stature and prestige in that single day, what for others would have taken a long period.
So he was intelligent, shrewd, and more than capable of challenging Rome.
He was a complete package, a formidable adversary.
So Shapur stabilizes his realm by 325. Now we get to the inevitable collision with Rome, where faith becomes the ultimate geopolitical tool.
And it's Constantine who makes the first move after Shapur takes full control. He sends a letter. It's polite, but its political implications are, as our sources say, unambiguous.
And he's not talking about trade or borders, he's talking about Christians.
Exactly. Constantine writes to Shapur, urging him not to persecute the Christians inside the Persian Empire. He commends them to Shapur's usual humanity, suggesting this mercy would benefit both of them.
That is sending a huge political message. By claiming to be the guardian of Christians everywhere, even in his rival's territory, he's making an ideological claim that crosses borders.
He's essentially saying, my religion is universal, and my authority is connected to its followers, even yours.
And Shapur agrees, at first.
At first, yeah. He sees no immediate threat, so he agrees to show mercy. But that tolerance becomes impossible very, very quickly.
Why?
Because Christianity itself is being rapidly co-opted as a sign of alliance. We see this perfectly with the conversion of King Izan of Aksum just west of the Red Sea.
Okay, so Izana's conversion, it wasn't just a personal spiritual journey.
No, his public conversion proclaimed his friendship with Rome just as loudly as it proclaimed his hope of heaven. You have to look at the map. Shapur was actively campaigning in nearby Arabia, extending his power right toward Africa.
So Izana needed a powerful ally.
A distant one, to balance the Persian threat. His conversion instantly guaranteed him Constantine's support if Persia decided to cross the Red Sea. The geopolitical lines were literally being drawn in baptismal water.
And nowhere was this convergence of faith and politics more critical than in Armenia.
Armenia was the crucial buffer state, squeezed between Rome and Persia for centuries. What made them unique here is that they had adopted Christianity way back in 303 AD.
So long before Constantine made it politically convenient.
Decades before. So when Constantine embraces Christianity, Armenia's pre-existing ties to the West naturally get much, much stronger.
Which creates an immediate threat right on Persia's doorstep.
From Shapur's perspective, a Christian Armenia is no longer a neutral buffer. It's a permanently hostile state, an ideological fifth column linked to Rome. So in 330, Persia takes indirect action.
What kind of action?
Shapur's agents convince King Tiridates' chamberlain to poison the king.
A covert assassination. They're trying to destabilize the Christian leadership and install a pro-Persian ruler.
But the strategy backfires completely. Tiridates doesn't just die, he becomes a martyr and eventually a saint. His son, Khosrau the Short, takes the throne, and the pro-Roman stance is stronger than ever.
So when indirect action fails, Shapur escalates. After a failed invasion of Armenia in 336, he cracks down on his own Christian population.
This is the turning point. Systematic persecution begins in 337. In Persian eyes, Christians are no longer just a religious minority, they're potential Roman double agents. The Persian Christian writer Afrahat records this period, writing of a great massacre of martyrs.
And this persecution in Persia gives Constantine the perfect justification for his final, massive political act.
He plans an invasion of Persia, framed explicitly as a crusade.
A crusade. This is a first, isn't it?
It's a massive first in history. His justification for war is purely religious, to aid the persecuted Persian Christians. He plans to bring a portable tabernacle and bishops to lead worship for the army. This was going to be God's army waging a holy war.
And there was a personal element to this for him, too.
A huge one. He announces that he would finally get baptized, something he'd put off his entire life, in the Jordan River when he arrived in the East. This is the moment a ruler plans to wield the cross, not just as a standard, but as the moral and divine engine for war against an outside enemy.
The fusion of church and state is now complete.
But history takes a sharp turn.
Constantine gets sick. He dies on May 22, 337, before the crusade can even launch.
He does. But his burial tells us everything about how he saw his own legacy. He's buried in Constantinople in a mausoleum at the Church of the Holy Apostles. It has 12 symbolic coffins for the apostles.
And his own is the 13th.
Exactly. He's claiming his place among the founders of the faith. Later historians, even some Christian ones, called this massive hubris. But his personal historian, Eusebius, praised him as a founder of the faith who had married Christianity and state politics forever.
And that political-religious marriage immediately leads to profound instability for his descendants.
Because Constantine's death was the exact signal Shapur had been patiently waiting for.
He knew how to exploit Roman weakness.
The second the news breaks, Shapur invades Armenia. This time, he succeeds, kicks out the Roman allied king, and installs a Persian puppet.
So the Great Crusade to liberate Christians is met with the immediate loss of Rome's most strategic Christian ally.
And Rome was too busy tearing itself apart to do anything about it.
Right. Constantine, for all his genius, had no concrete succession plan. He leaves behind 3 sons and a nephew who all hold the title of Caesar.
And what follows is just immediate, bloody chaos in Constantinople. It wasn't a transition, it was a purge.
And the sons, Constantine II, Constantius, and Constans, were almost certainly behind it.
They benefited from it, let's put it that way. Nearly every potential rival was murdered. Constantine's nephew, 2 of his brothers-in-law, and numerous court officials.
The only survivors of that purge were the 3 sons and their 5-year-old cousin Julian,
who was wisely hidden away in Asia Minor, far from the capital and the family knives.
So the empire is split 3 ways. Constantius gets the east and Constantinople,
which puts him on the front line with Shapur. He inherits the primary military burden and immediately has to try and reinvade Armenia to put Khosrow the Short back on the throne.
But the instability wasn't just in the east. Only 3 years later, in 340, the fratricide begins.
Constans, ruling the west, ambushes and kills his older brother, Constantine II, who had tried to invade Italy. So now we're down to 2 rulers. You can just feel the fragility of the empire at this point.
And Constans himself wasn't exactly popular?
Not at all. Even the church historians, who normally praise Christian rulers, disliked him. They describe his personality as foul, saying he was greedy and incompetent.
So it's no surprise he's murdered by his own generals in 350.
At age 27. And the generals immediately crown a usurper, Magnicius. So now Constantius, the sole surviving son, has to spend 2 years fighting another massive, debilitating civil war to reclaim the whole empire.
And that 2-year distraction, that's the strategic gift Shapur was waiting for.
Of course. While Constantius is busy in the west, Shapur reclaims Armenia yet again. And this time, he captures Khosrow's son, has him blinded, and lets him rule only as a subject of Persia.
Blinding a Roman client king, that's a profound act of humiliation.
It solidified Persia's absolute dominance over the buffer state. Shapur just used the Roman succession crisis as constant, decades-long leverage.
So by 352, Constantius has finally unified the empire. But he has no son. The succession crisis isn't solved, it's just postponed.
And out of sheer desperation, in 355, he appoints his surviving cousin, Julian, as Caesar and heir.
The same Julian who survived the purge.
The very same. He's 23, and he's immediately put in charge of the western half of the empire, specifically the critical Rhine front against the German tribes.
And Julian immediately proves his competence.
He's a brilliant general. He campaigned successfully on the Rhine, earning the deep, enthusiastic support of the army. And even better for the regular people, he drastically reduces taxation. He's exactly the kind of strong leader Rome needs.
Which, ironically, makes him an immediate threat to Constantius.
Exactly. Meanwhile, Constantius, the sole emperor, is squandering his own authority not on the battlefield, but through deeply unpopular theological meddling.
This is where we get into the Arian heresy. Okay, so break this down for us. What exactly is Arianism and why was it so explosive?
In simple terms, Arianism was the belief that Christ was created by God the Father and was therefore subordinate to him. This clashed directly with the Nicene view, which insisted Christ was co-eternal and co-equal with the Father.
So this wasn't just some abstract debate for theologians.
Not at all. It was a politically charged civil war over the nature of authority. If Christ was created, then the church hierarchy could be more easily controlled by earthly powers, like the emperor,
And Constantius, unlike his father, was an Arian.
a devoted one. And he used this belief to consolidate his power. In 355, he uses his imperial authority to depose the anti-Arian bishop of Rome, Liberius, and install his own guy.
An explosive move. Why was the Bishop of Rome so important at this point?
The Bishop of Rome was building this claim that he was the spiritual successor to the Apostle Peter. This gave him a claim to authority that rivaled other ancient Christian centers. So when Constantius meddles, he's seen as trying to seize control of the emerging Western spiritual Supreme Court.
Which alienates basically everyone.
Everyone. Even the rival bishops in Alexandria and Antioch agreed the emperor shouldn't be unilaterally appointing bishops. It was imperial overreach.
But Constantius doesn't back down. He doubles down.
He does. In 359, he calls his own church council and basically declares that Arianism is now officially orthodox doctrine. By trying to define Christian truth by imperial decree, he loses almost all his political capital in the West.
So you have a deeply unpopular emperor in the East fighting Shapur and an extremely popular Caesar Julian in the West. This can't last.
It doesn't. In 360, Constantius, alarmed by Julian's popularity, demands that troops from the West be sent east to the Persian front.
Which Julian correctly sees as a political move to strip him of his power base.
And he refuses. His army on the Rhine backs him up and elevates him to co-emperor. The empire is now teetering on the edge of another massive civil war.
And Constantius can't move west to crush Julian because Shapur is knocking on the eastern door.
The threat was terrifyingly real. The historian Ammianus Marcianus was actually there, spying in Persian-controlled Armenia. He described seeing the Persian armies advance, the whole circuit of the lands filled with innumerable troops, with Shapur himself leading the way, glittering in splendid attire.
And Ammianus was in one of the most brutal battles of the time, the Siege of Amida. He gives us these incredible, visceral details.
He does. The Romans are ambushed, and he describes being trapped in a massive throng, unable to move, for an entire day. He says they were so crowded that the bodies of the slain, held upright by the throng, could nowhere find room to fall.
The bodies being held upright by the living? I mean, that's just a horrifying image.
And Ammianus was there. His accounts are considered the gold standard. Amida was besieged for 73 days, attacked by archers and war elephants, which he called dreadful beyond every form of horror.
And the Romans lost Amida and other fortresses. Constantius is trapped between a usurper in the west and Shapur in the east.
And his dilemma is solved not by strategy, but by fate. He dies suddenly of a fever, a virus probably, on October 5, 361.
And just like that, Julian, the sole surviving male relative, becomes the sole emperor.
He inherits the entire empire and, critically, the ongoing war with Persia.
And the moment Julian takes Constantinople, his true identity emerges. This is where he gets the nickname, Julian the Apostate.
His Christian upbringing had backfired spectacularly. He openly announces his opposition to Christianity, rejecting his baptism as a nightmare. He declares his sympathy for the old Roman religion. He was committed to undoing everything his uncle Constantine had done.
His first move is symbolic reopening the old temples. But his second move is strategic, and it's aimed right at the foundation of the Christian political class.
Education. Julian decreed that no Christian could teach literature.
That's a brilliant, if utterly draconian move. Why was it so effective?
Because a literary education, Homer, Virgil, all the pagan classics, was required for all government officials. Julian was ensuring that in the future, only people with a Roman-meaning pagan education could hold power. It was a long-term plan to purge the Christian elite from government.
It was a cultural and bureaucratic coup.
Absolutely. His motivation was deeply conservative. He wanted to restore Romanness. His mentor had warned him that if you extinguish our literature, we are put on a level with the barbarians. And to Julian, Christians were barbarians and atheists.
So Christian writers try to adapt, right? They try to create their own curriculum.
They do. They translate the Psalms into classical odes, the Pentateuch into the meter of Homer, They even tried to rewrite the Gospels in the style of Plato. But the sources say most of it was substandard and just disappeared.
Julian's counter-revolution had two main strategies. The first was just stealing the church's successful tools.
Right. He realized the old Roman religion was too decentralized to compete with Christianity's hierarchy, so he reorganizes the Roman priesthood using the same model as the Christian church.
And he modernized the worship itself.
Yes, he ordered Roman priests to import sermons and communal singing into the old rituals. He was trying to make Jupiter worship look a lot more like Jesus worship. It's a huge irony. To defeat Christianity, he had to copy it.
And his second strategy was even more cynical, weaponizing the divisions within Christianity itself.
A very subtle and effective tactic. He allowed all the banished Christian churchmen from both sides of that fierce Nicene-Arian debate to return home.
Knowing they were incapable of getting along.
He knew their theological arguments would immediately break out again, consuming all their energy. He capitalized on the church's internal power to divide.
But the ultimate irony is that Julian, who wants to restore this pure Romanness and purge barbarians, is immediately forced to allow actual barbarians into the empire.
The pragmatism of power always trumps ideology. He couldn't fight Shapur in the east and the German tribes on the Rhine at the same time. So he lets the Franks settle in northern Gaul as feudality Roman allies with rights to neutralize the threat before he marches east.
Which brings us to 363 AD, the Grand March. Julian launches his Persian campaign with a massive force of 85,000 men.
It was a colossal army. Roman legions, Goths, even Arab tribesmen who wanted revenge on Shapur for the whole shoulder-tearing business. This was Julian's chance to prove the old gods were superior.
But he doesn't bring Christian clergy, he brings soothsayers and Greek philosophers.
And they immediately start arguing. The soothsayers claim the omens are bad and the army should withdraw. The philosophers dismiss them as illogical superstition. So there's conflicting counsel right from the start.
He plans a classic pincer move on Ctesiphon, the Persian capital.
An audacious plan. He divides his forces and sails down the Euphrates with a massive fleet, 50 war galleys, 1,000 supply ships. The idea was to surround the city for a quick, decisive siege.
But Shapur was too smart to get trapped.
Far too smart. He deploys classic Fabian strategy. He just abandons Ctesiphon. Julian arrives and lays siege to an empty city.
While Shapur is safely gathering more men from across his empire.
Exactly. It was a brilliant delaying tactic that exhausted the Roman supply chain. When Shapur finally returns to fight, Julian is forced to retreat up the Tigris. And then the Persians use scorched earth tactics.
They burn everything. All the fields, the storehouses.
Everything. The Roman soldiers are starving, wounded, and constantly harassed by Persian cavalry. The retreat becomes this weeks-long ordeal of hunger and demoralization.
And it's during a Persian ambush on this retreat that Julian meets his end.
He's struck by a Persian spear in his lower abdomen and slowly bleeds to death. His campaign, his life, his entire religious movement, it all ends in failure, deep inside enemy territory.
And his death, like his life, is surrounded by these competing narratives.
Two equally unlikely but highly symbolic accounts. Ammianus Marcellinus, who was there, describes this beautifully stoic philosophical death where Julian discusses the nobility of the soul. It's the death a classical hero would want.
And then there's the Christian version.
From the historian Theodoret, he insists Julian died in agony, finally recognizing Christ's power and exclaiming, "Thou hast won, O Galilean."
Whichever version you believe, the reality was the same. The Roman army was stranded, leaderless, and starving.
So they needed a leader, fast. They proclaimed General Jovian, a Christian, as the new emperor.
And Jovian is a pragmatist. He knows he can't continue this war.
The choice was simple. Fight to the last man and lose, or surrender territory and save the army. He immediately seeks a parley with Shapur.
And the terms of the treaty he makes, they're condemned back home as the most humiliating peace Rome had suffered in generations.
It was a piece of absolute necessity. Jovian agrees to hand over all Roman land east of the Tigris, and that included the vital Roman fortress of Nisibis.
Why was Nisibis so crucial? It sounds like more than just a fortress.
Nisibis was the cornerstone of Rome's entire eastern defense, the gate to the east. Handing it over to Shapur wasn't just losing a city, it was permanently breaching the eastern defenses. Nisibis was never returned to Western control, and it became the center of future Persian assaults.
It was a fundamental shift in the balance of power.
A permanent one.
So Jovian saves the army, and then he tries to chart a middle way for the empire, especially on religion.
He tries to divorce church and state. He revokes Julian's anti-Christian decrees, but he refuses to replace them with anti-pagan ones. He declares religious toleration for all. He was personally a Nicene Christian, but he wanted to take religion out of the center of politics.
But as we've seen in the New Rome, that separation was basically impossible.
The sources suggest religious and political legitimacy were just too intertwined. A really strong, charismatic emperor might have pulled it off. But Jovian's political authority was already fatally weakened by that shameful treaty with Shapur.
So his refusal to rely on a strict religious orthodoxy for power meant that his political failure left him with no authority at all.
And his reign was tragically short, just 8 months. He dies suddenly, inexplicably, in his tent while traveling back east.
And the reports are suspiciously varied. Fumes, indigestion.
Or a swollen head. Ammianus Marcellinus, ever the cold observer, notes chillingly that no investigation was made of the death.
And with Jovian's death, the door just slams shut on the old Roman religion ever dominating the court again. The era of pagan emperors was definitively over.
It was decided by the success of Shapur exploiting Roman weakness, the bloody failure of Constantine's succession, and the utter disaster of Julian's campaign. Roman military necessity now dictated a Christian future. It was the only cohesive ideology left standing.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner? We've seen how the ambition of a formidable adversary like Shapur II, combined with the extreme instability of the Roman succession, forced Rome into this decades-long defensive posture.
It all culminates in the complete failure of Julian's pagan restoration and the loss of critical eastern territory, including that pivotal fortress Nisibis.
We've tracked how political power and religious faith became inseparable in the New Rome. Emperors had to either embrace Christianity for legitimacy like Constantine and Constantius did, or ruthlessly try to suppress it, as Julian discovered, to his fatal cost.
Which leaves us with a final, challenging thought for you to consider. We've seen that the need for political legitimacy forced emperors to rely heavily on religious claims for unity.
Given that reality, what does the source material suggest was the biggest cost of Jovian's final, honest attempt to grant true religious tolerance and divorce faith from imperial politics? Was true religious tolerance even possible in the 4th century, or was the separation of church and state simply a recipe for an authority vacuum in Constantinople?
Something to ponder as you navigate the historical echoes of this chaotic and pivotal era.
That's it for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.